For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to Less Talk, More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice of building decarbonization. Not joining me today, my co-host Owen, who's usually here, the self-proclaimed Adam Newman of Green Building. He's an entrepreneur. He's out there cutting deals, so he couldn't make it. And bad news for him, because we had Sherrell Dorsey as our guest, who was just fantastic. I left the conversation inspired. She's an award-winning climate tech and business journalist, author, entrepreneur. She's the founder of The Plug, a pioneering news and insights platform covering the Black innovation economy. She hosts a TED Talk podcast. She advises business. She's a journalist. I mean, just fantastic. And I'll say we're not going to do a bit in this episode because Sherrell and I are actually going to share the stage at the upcoming Net Zero conference in Los Angeles. So it's a great conference. We're going to be on stage as the keynotes on October 1st here coming up. And you can still sign up to attend that conference. I've been at that conference in the past. The Vertical Group, Green Building Consulting Company, puts it on. It's usually fantastic, dynamic, diverse group of people and speakers. And so couldn't encourage anyone who's in this field more. If you can get to Los Angeles or you happen to be near Los Angeles around October 1st, sign up, go to netzeroconference.com, and you're going to see Sherrell and I on stage there. And we'll build on what was really a uplifting conversation about her work and how she sees the world in the future. And it really vibes with what we try to do here on Let's Talk More Action, which is be positive, be hopeful, lean into innovation, go build stuff, don't complain. So I think everyone's really going to love it. I'm sorry Owen missed it. But with that, let's dive into the conversation with Sherrell Dorsey. Joining us today is Sherrell Dorsey, an award-winning climate tech and business journalist, author, and entrepreneur. She is the founder of The Plug, the pioneering news and insights platform covering the Black innovation economy, which went on to be acquired after reshaping how we think about equity and innovation in tech. Sherrell is also the author of Upper Hand, The Future of Work for the Rest of Us, and has been featured in outlets like Fast Company and The Atlantic, recognized nationally for her leadership at the intersection of sustainability, technology, and equity. Sherrell brings a powerful voice to the conversation on how we build a more inclusive and climate resilient future. So, Sherrell, welcome to Let's Talk More Action.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting. I'm really excited about this conversation today.
Great. Well, it's an honor to have you. And like all our guests, we got right to work here. We start the guests off with the same question. Sherrell, how are you taking action to make the world a better place?
Absolutely. I think both, I like to answer this with kind of two perspectives. I think the first is a lot of practice what you preach, right? So trying to live as intentionally as possible and be an example within my family, within my community, within my network, around this idea that, hey, we all are responsible for what happens to the planet, and we all have skills to do our part to ensure that we are caring for this good old home that we have. And then I think just more externally, I've been hosting the TED Tech podcast for the last almost 4 years now, and really centering this conversation of both innovation and tools like AI and the intersection of climate and the opportunity that we have to really advance a lot of these technologies that will help to decarbonize, right? Or just help us be smarter about water, air, emissions overall. And so that's a large part, of my work. And in this second tranche of my life, really working on how we think about this next generation and how they engage with the storytelling of climate and get activated and empowered to be problem solvers in their own right. So it's very, very kind of multi-channel, but I do try to be as intentional as possible, for sure.
Well, very cool. So you and I are going to share the stage in a couple weeks. While this will probably
Yes.
air the week of the conference. So the Net Zero Conference in Los Angeles, one of my favorite events. I've been going for years. I know the host of the show, the Vertical Group, and Drew Shula, great people. Shout out to y'all.
Amazing people, yeah.
And so I was asked to be a keynote, and then subsequently after, I was asked if I would like to do the keynote with you. And admittedly,
Yeah.
sadly, at that time, I did not know about you, and we were introduced a couple weeks ago. And there's a lot of ways I want to go in this conversation, but I'm going to start kind of maybe out of left field, just with like branding and content for people
Yeah.
in this space. So, I've been following you on Instagram since we were introduced, and I just love the content. It's uplifting, but it's raw, and it's honest, but it's stylish, and it's cool, and it's futuristic, and it's like, I don't my thesis on like where we're going in sustainability. It's like this show has been really good for me to like center my thoughts and ask lots of people, but I definitely have this perspective that like we're not creating a movement that inspires people anymore. I don't know. Maybe you see this differently, but like I've been doing this now 20 years. And like at one point I was like so gung ho and adamant.
Yeah.
I was part of a tribe and I was like, we're going to do this. And somewhere along the line, I feel like it got too wonky and we're talking about too many numbers and counting emissions of a fake gas in the an invisible gas in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it's too much around regulation. And then it's finger pointing of which side's doing more. And it's like, man, if this was just cool, people want to protect the planet. Like we could create a movement that like galvanizes more people. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a long like way of asking you a question of what's your
Yeah.
advice to others who are trying to like galvanize a movement here?
Honestly, Joel, first of all, I totally agree with you. I think we're speaking the same language in that. I feel like we have lost the plot, right? We have lost the plot in this conversation. Like I said, I'm from Seattle, so I live, breathe, environmentalism. It was part of our education. So since like kindergarten, we talked about turning off the faucet while brushing your teeth, right? Recycling. Like I was that kid in my dorm in New York City where like all of my dorm like floor mates were from other cities that never had any kind of infrastructure around anything green. So I get it. And what I recognized for a very long time is that you either have kind of two storytelling aspects of this conversation. It's either very crunchy granola, elitist, ivory tower that kind of goes over people's heads and doesn't connect, right? Like I don't want to, talk about, composting when I just am trying to pay my light bill that has increased by 30% in the last year, right?
Yeah,
We talking about very practical things. And then you have the other side. The other side is very inaccessible, high luxury. You live in a net zero home in, the middle of a desert of California, and you have paid $1 million for a plot of land, and now you too can live a sustainable existence, right? And so I think that there's this middle section that has kind of been hollowed out, and this idea that like we're infighting about numbers or what have you versus how do we speak to people and connect with people about just everyday opportunities and choices and resources, at the end of the day. And I also just want to say thank you for the kudos on the gram. I always feel like an elder millennial where I'm either like peace signing it up or just trying to figure out like how do I get creative? Like these folks are so creative across the internet with social media, and I feel so boring most of the time. But I think that to your point, Joel, it is. We are so multi-layered from our careers to our lives, to how we travel, to where we go and buy our groceries, to our cultural backgrounds and, what we call our grandparents or their influences in our lives. And I think there's a level of authenticity that has to be brought back in. And we have to tell our stories, I think very, very authentically, very genuinely. And I try to do that when I show up online, when I think about the opportunity and innovation. As you mentioned, I got a chance to actually connect with Drew in Nairobi during the TED Countdown Summit. And I mean, from him to local farmers to startup founders in the space that are experimenting with solar cook stoves to solar powered water pumps and helping farmers to extend their harvest fourfold over. There's so much opportunity in this space that's actually changing lives and doing incredible work, right? And so when we talk about sustainability, when we talk about climate, it is across the board. I did my undergrad at FIT in New York City, and during that time, we were talking about sustainable textiles. We were talking about what does it look like to break down fabrics and to be able to reuse them so that we prevent this thing, called, landfill waste or textile waste. And so I try to also incorporate that into a lot of my content that like, hey, I'm a fashion girly as much as the other person is, right? I love design. I love sustainability. And when those things come together and you meet and connect with founders that are using interesting fabrics that can compost or biodegrade, you're like, oh my gosh, there's an opportunity for innovation. And it's not just about like, let's save the planet and, Captain Planet, Planeteers, right? Which I definitely have been one for a very long time, original OG. But I get excited about the possibilities, right? Like this is what innovation is supposed to be. Like, I remember when there used to be beauty brands that were creating, lipstick tubes that when you were done with it, you could plant it and it would turn into a flower. And I just think that's cool. Like there's just this interesting factor of like, well, what can we do? We don't have to actually do things the same.
Yeah.
And so I think the story just can be inspiring. It can be bigger, and it doesn't have to disconnect from who we are at our core.
Well, a lot of cool stuff there, and I can just tell the vibe of your perspective here is uplifting, optimistic, innovative, and that's definitely where I live, where this show lives. Sadly, my co-host Owen couldn't be here, but I know he shares the same perspective. He's always on here just being like, man, shut up and stop complaining. Go build stuff. There's lots of
build
opportunity.
stuff. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and back to you like self-deprecating about your Instagram and the cool factor. I would just say like it's definitely cool. Like you're way cooler than I am or could be, and it's authentic. And I think you said that a couple times. And that's we've never been in a more important moment with all the noise and baggage on social media and the internet and now AI. You never know what's real, and I think the country, the world has never been starving more for authentic people. And I'll tell a quick story. Maybe this will be a good segue into your business operations. I work at a company, a very cool climate tech startup using AI to decarbonize buildings. I work for two incredible young women founders who built this incredible brand, and we definitely benefit. The business benefits from some of the stuff that I like bag on social media, which is like in commercial real estate, there's a lot of time spent gathering data and reporting it to either government agencies or states or third-party frameworks so that investors have transparency. And you say that out loud, it's like, oh, that all makes sense. Of course we have to do that. But like when you're in the weeds of our industry, it's to me become way too burdensome, and it's preventing. Like I used to sit in a seat where I was in charge of a decarbonization platform at Google, and we'd spend so much time on this reporting, and I used to be like, I used to work in construction. Instead of doing this, I could go actually like install heat pumps and decarbonize our buildings.
Right.
So, but it's a long way of saying like sometimes I'm like critical of frameworks that my current company benefits from. And I've had conversations with our two founders about this, and I'm like, look, they don't tell me what to say. Like they're very cool about it, but I say like, look, I have to be authentic. I have to be who I am. And that's going to help our company in the long run. I think if I'm a part of it, it's going to help me succeed in this company. And this company, the two of them had said from the beginning, we're going to be action obsessed, even though we're a software platform that organizes data and uses AI to provide insights. So like, that's a long way of saying like, I think authenticity, even when you think it might be in detriment of what you're doing in your current like work, is still going to help you in the long run. And we always got to think that way, which I'm sure you agree with. So then all that to be said, I'm on your LinkedIn and it says, I can click on and say, book a one-on-one for business advice. So tell me more. I mean, you do a lot of stuff. Your bio is super impressive. I'd love to get into the TED Talk and the podcast and the things you've sold in the past. But right now, if I book you for business advice, what are we going to learn?
Anything you want, quite frankly. I am someone who has really centered storytelling as a through line within my career. I've worked for a couple of different tech companies and startups. I actually started working at Microsoft in high school. I got an opportunity to learn how to program. Go figure, grew up in Seattle, so I was a Microsoft kid. Worked for companies like Uber, Google Fiber. And at the time, I was growing this publication that I kind of accidentally turned into a business. Just having this sense of curiosity about, hey, like there's so many interesting innovation conversations that are being left out. Like, not only how do we tell those stories, but also like, what are these really cool things that are erupting in trends that we can actually cover and back, by data, at the end of the day. And so, I sold that business about 2 years ago, and started to hyper focus my attention here, kind of back to climate, just realizing like this is the most significant part of what we need to be focused on as human beings on a global perspective. And so actually, funny enough, I had a conversation today with a founder out of India who booked time with me, who wanted to get some insight on breaking into the U.S. media market. And for some of the things that he's building, the kind of tools he's building for publishers. Again, as a storyteller, I'm really passionate about newcomers and people in the space, making it easier for us to do reporting, to have smart journalism and accessibility, and also to expand hopeful, positive, accurate, messages, across the board. I've had conversations with, there was a gentleman who had a business in Chicago who does engine repair for fire trucks. And now this is a specialty because not just anyone can work on fire trucks, right? That's a very special kind of skill set in the mechanic world. And his business was booming so much because he's like one of very few, particularly in that city, in that community that could take on these contracts. And his challenge was around being able to scale because the business was getting so many inquiries, so many referrals, that he was trying to figure out, like, how do I scale this, because it's just me and I have a couple of contractors. So we were able to kind of sit down and start thinking about how he could start to create an onboarding strategy for people who also had the skill to work under him to be able to start answering some of these calls and growing his business in a sustainable way. And, as an operator, as someone who has, built a multi-million-dollar company, has raised capital, who has, had to build a team, there's just so many operating principles that are transferable. And I find that there's so many founders, or those who are looking to be founders, are looking for a lot of practical advice. And what I love about, platforms around being able to book time is that, when I was starting and building, my company, I had some resources, but I didn't have the practicality of someone who had been in the trenches of like those late nights, early mornings, running out of cash, trying to make payroll, kind of conversations. And so when you book time with me, you book advice with me, you have someone who's both going to be empathetic, but I think very similar to Owen. Like, all right, like we've already identified the problem for the first 5 minutes. Now let's go ahead and figure out how to solve it.
Well, it's really cool stuff, Sherrell, and I'm gonna have to book some time. I think not only for like myself. I think this podcast really could use some voice, some guidance, like you're describing, and of course, the company I work at, which is growing and exploding and doing great things. We can always learn.
That's
and
awesome.
I would say, let's go back to storytelling. Again, I worry that the sustainability movement, like, I don't know who the leaders are anymore. There was a time 20 years ago when someone asked me who's on the Mount Rushmore of like sustainability. I would have been kind of clear at that point. And now I don't know. I feel like the people that paved the way in like the 70s, the 60s and 70s and 80s, these like legends that like created the early environmental movement that we should all be grateful for, have now moved on and aren't the leaders that we need for the next frontier. So Is that you? Are you the voice that we need to go on Mount
Oh my
Rushmore?
gosh. Honestly, I'm trying to steward the voices and the movements and the organizations. And I think that's what I think the beauty of being a journalist is that like you kind of get to be a generalist in these spaces, right? I'm here and I think I love this profession because I'm constantly learning. I don't have any complete answers. As an entrepreneur, I get to experiment. And as a journalist, I get to sit and ask a lot of questions and be the dumbest person in the room and just be open. I mean, this space is so large, right? Like you work on the real estate, side of the business, right? I have a friend who works in the regenerative agriculture, side and how we grow our food and how we'll grow our food in the future. I'm going to be sharing the stage during the Climate Narrative Summit with ocean tech founders, right? Who are
Love it. Yeah.
taking like ocean byproduct and turning it into biomolecules to treat water to make sure it's clean for us to drink. So there's so much. It's so vast. It's so expansive. I think there's lots of leaders, and I think that where technology and social media particularly has allowed for us to do is not necessarily have like the Mount Rushmore of certain people, of a handful of people. It is everyone with agency who's talking about these issues, who's leading a movement, who's building something is part of the solution. And sometimes that might be, regional leadership, right? It might just be online leadership. It might be from a global perspective. They might be working on just one singular issue. But what gives me a lot of hope is that number one, I'm finding new people every day to like follow their work, right, in their own way, and that's across ages, that's across countries, that's across background, and so I think that there's. I hate to use this word to just, of the times, like decentralized, right? It's like decentralized leadership, but leadership nevertheless.
Yeah. Wow, it's very cool. And I'm not a journalist. We have a podcast, but I would say, like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, a lot of times it's the niches that are important. You got to get really focused. Like Owen's businesses, he does solar on multifamily that has a certain sort of utility meter structure, and he's just really good at that market. It's a big market, but like he's focused, and I respect that. I think that's how businesses work. And like for us right now, we're highly focused on large commercial real estate owners that have messy data all over the world and lots of opportunities to decarbonize, hiding in plain sight. So great, focus there. But like as someone who got into this career path because I love the earth and care for the environment, and I'm like an environmentalist generally. I'm interested in food. I love the ocean. I'm a surfer. My wife works in fashion, so I'm very aware of the environmental impact and opportunity within fashion. And so I would say, it sounds like you're similar. Having this podcast and being able to invite folks on that aren't like in commercial real estate sustainability, like we have those people on, and those conversations can get pretty in the weeds. But I love bringing on people that are working on all kinds of parts of this this world and this work. And like you said, cross generations, different kinds of people all across the world at different scales. And it all matters. And it does, I think, some people often in the environmentalists maybe sometimes get really down on, man, we were supposed to be at 1.5 degrees of warming, and now we've way exceeded that, and now the future is screwed. And I'm just very focused on all the negativity, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening and a lot of opportunity to make the future better. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also that's where, our role too, as, people with platforms, right? Like not just journalists, but it's significant for us to have these conversations so that there might be someone that just identifies with you and your background, right, Joel? Like, a family man, in a city that is, both thriving and, in the suburbs. And like, there's a group of people who can identify with that and are like, oh, like, what does Joel have to say about this? How can I like optimize my home for, efficiencies, right? And where do I go? Because you're a trusted voice, right? You're a trusted expert. And so I don't want to discount, how much influence and the storytelling and authenticity matters, right? And I think that when we look at the environmental movements and like God bless these folks, right? Like they were responsible for getting us the kinds of regulations that have protected our air, our water, our land for decades, right? Things that we've been able to enjoy, especially like as outdoor enthusiasts. But I also think that, some of the disconnect can come from the hypercriticism or the almost like holier than thou, kind of thing. And like, And like people don't want to feel ashamed, for living their lives and enjoying the luxuries that a modern world has afforded them. I was at like SoCap in San Francisco. Might have been last year, and I'm sitting here, I'm sitting in a circle with like folks from like all over, and there's this amazing young woman, environmentalist out of Brazil. And, she said something really poignant. She's like, as the developing world modernizes and gets access to the same kind of resources and tools that we've like just had as like part of our day to day, we can't start, shaming or trying to take these things away in the name of environmentalism, right? Something as simple as air conditioning, right? Air conditioning is a luxury. It is a luxury. And in certain parts of the world where it is extremely hot, they don't have access to air conditioning. That is an inaccessible, tool, right? And so as power, continuous power is provided through, new kinds of energy projects, we can't then go and say, oh, well, you don't get to have this because it's, it's going to take our emissions, goals back.
Your grid might be dirty right now, so don't have
your
air
grid might be
conditioning.
dirty.
Yeah.
Like you don't get to do it, and we've had it for decades, right? And so, so I don't think that that's the way forward. I think that we have to have a more realistic and holistic conversation. And this is where I think that innovation conversation makes sense, right? Like Climate Week is coming up, and last Climate Week, I was at the the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and New Lab had all of these incredible like companies and all of them like electric.
I was there too.
Bikes.
We probably
we
were in the
missed
same
each
place.
other. Yeah.
That's
But
a
like,
cool
I don't know
event.
if you saw like the electric motorcycle bikes, or I met this guy out of Sweden who actually has like an electric low cost air conditioning that you can just like set up in buildings that's specifically for like commercial spaces. And it's just like you're walking in this world of wonders, of anticipatory wonders that like, hey, if these companies had the right funding and the right partners, they could scale some really epic things that are designed phenomenally, right? And, I think there was even like this whole team that has like these solar panel installer robots so you can prevent like human beings from having to climb on roofs and what have you. But there's just like this sea of opportunity, and I try to showcase that as much as I can through my content. Like, hey, there's a different way. There's like vintage cars that can be turned completely electric, right? There's your John Deere tractor that, you no longer have to put diesel in. Not that I'm ever in the market for a tractor, but the fact that can exist for the construction industry, it's about wonder and possibility, right? And I think that's what invention and innovation is supposed to advance. And so even if you're not a crunchy granola person or even care about the planet, like just the fact that these things exist, it's like, it's super cool. It also means an opportunity for jobs, for training, for learning, right? And hopefully just like possibility of trying something new.
Yeah, I mean, the broad public likes cool. They like cool products more than they like products that could save the planet. That's just the reality. So if you can create a cool product that also helps the planet, like that's where, I mean, we can all be critical of maybe in the environmental movement of some of Elon Musk's moves, but like Tesla's a great example of that. They just build a great product, and
and like open
people that don't
source
care about the environment will drive that car because it's cool.
And like, let's like, like all, politics aside, like, let's be clear, that move and the way in which it was created and designed, and it's particularly in this country, it pushed other auto manufacturers to not just make like a golf cart kind of car, right? Like the kind of stuff now in the market is super sexy. You've got, luxury electric cars, that have hit the market, and it's like, okay, I want something really fly to drive. And making people realize like, I kind of want the same thing, just green it up for me. Green it up for me. I'm willing to pay just a little bit more, but green it up for me.
Well, I do a weekly LinkedIn post every Wednesday where I start it with cool decarb tech I think the world should know about. And
I love that.
I think this week was week 14. I started doing it, 14 weeks ago. And because of my career and the places I've worked, I've been at Google, I worked at the city of Santa Monica, and we built one of the world's greenest buildings. I've been exposed to a lot of cool products. So I've been like, tap in things I knew, and I'm like, oh, I came across this, so I have like personal, direct working experience with this thing. But like as this bit of mine moves on, I'm gonna need more ammo in the capacity. So I think the solar robots, I'm gonna have to follow up with you afterwards. Maybe that's something I can explore, because like Owen, we talk a lot about solar. I've been doing solar a long time, and the labor cost is where the stuff gets expensive. So we can get robots up there. That's cool in a lot of ways. But let's transition back to you and I sharing the stage here in a couple weeks at Net Zero in LA. Before they offered the opportunity to share the stage with you, I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, and I won't say that yet because I don't want to bias what you're going to say. But I would say, like, what message do you have for the Net Zero conference in LA?
Oh my gosh, on the spot! Oh my goodness.
And we're workshopping this, so feel free to throw out ideas. We're workshopping it.
You know what? So I think a couple of things, because I think about the audience that will be there in person, right? The industry players that are like already bought in, and and I'm sure like you attend so many conferences around the world. Like a lot of times we're in these rooms where we're preaching to the choir, right? Yeah. And so I think my goal, I think my goal is less about just a general message and more of what is the new thinking. In what ways should we be thinking, right? We are at a time where, particularly federal resources are no longer going to be there, right? To kind of help subsidize a lot of the new innovation in building around like green infrastructure, right? And so we have this really interesting opportunity in the face of a really big problem to think about, well, how do we innovate if we don't have access to the same resources, right? How are you as a builder, an engineer, an architect, an architect, thinking about how do we build a future that may not be subsidized?
Yeah, I like that.
What are the connection points that we need to think about? Because problems, right? What is it? What is the saying? Like, innovation is a result of necessity.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like, well, now how do we have to rethink this? Like, let's say for the next 3-4 years, we know for sure that like resources are not going to be available. We know that, your average everyday consumer, who is going to be concerned about their overall livelihood. What kind of audience or market do we have to plan for? Right. I want to touch on like those big questions. And then I also want to think about, particularly, with the conversation being recorded, what are some of the things that we can share with those who are not in this space, who are not in this industry, who have a sense of curiosity, particularly in terms of like, maybe they're looking at careers in this space. Maybe we talk about your transition, right, into this space, like working for a tech company. Like I would never have thought about, being someone who's in construction to go and work for a place like Google, right? And like, how do we dive into what is like Google's role in the world of real estate, right? Outside of like having offices, right? Or maybe
I got lots of opinions there.
I'm sure, right? I'm sure. But even just in terms of servicing, right? And just even your role now, like in terms of servicing industry to make it better and greener, right? And maybe the sales pitch isn't about better, greener. Maybe it's about cheaper, faster, right? And that's what resonates with, in a B2B enterprise. So those are some of the things that I've been kind of thinking about in terms of the kind of conversation we can have, because I don't want it to be a big yawn. I want it to be interesting for the audience. I want it to translate well. Once, there's some chopped and screwed clips.
We're not just going to go up there and kind of, give the echo chamber what they want. Let's like try to rock the boat a little bit.
Let's mix it up. Yeah. Let's mix it up. And I really want to like, focus in on, why you're in this space, right? Like not the kind of, PR, pat answers and responses. It's really is like, what drives you, what makes you stay in this industry, outside of the paycheck, right? It's like,
well, let me throw an idea at you.
Yeah.
This is something I've been thinking about, and we've had a couple conversations on the podcast with others about this idea. I worry, this is like a big question, maybe we can bounce around on stage. I worry we're too climate focused as an environmental movement. I was 20, I was 19 years old when I went to college, and I was in intro to geology class, and I learned about climate change, and it was immediately like, wow, this is the problem of the future. I want to get into solving this. And you learn the science and you understand the risks. And I went to graduate school and kind of continued a more of a master's perspective of climate science. And I'm not a climate denier. I know it's a challenge, but like, I think getting people focused on counting this invisible gas in the atmosphere and having these esoteric targets about how to limit warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, I think it's alienating more people than it is attracting to a movement. And we're never going to have the real like kind of coalition of people globally to protect the best parts of this planet if we kind of drown them in this wonky, boring kind of climate idea. And there's lots, people can get behind saving the oceans. People can get behind saving the rainforest. People can get behind clean air, clean water. There's lots of things that this movement could be like rock solid politically across all coalitions. There's no disagreement. But like shaming people into not installing air conditioning, shaming people who are working in the oil and gas industry, shaming companies that produce things for us that are made out of plastic. That's not how you galvanize a larger political movement. So it's like somewhere, I guess like I said, I've been in this industry, I've been doing this for 2 decades, and maybe I'm just old and jaded, or maybe I'm seeing a signal like, hey, let's maybe time out on all this climate stuff. And even I saw it at Google, like I benefited. My job on the real estate sustainability team, there was 15 of us, and there were specialists working on ecology, working on water, working on circularity. But like I was in charge of the net zero, like the climate program. And so I got like a lot of the resources, and I like benefited professionally from that emphasis on climate, where looking back, I'm like, maybe we should have just done more with ecology and circularity. And like we spent a lot of time counting emissions that could have gone to making our real estate more circular and better for the local biodiversity. So I don't know. That's a big question, I think, worth batting around, maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's existentialism, right? And like, and here's the thing, like, I don't think, there's anything wrong or, misinformed with whatever initial movements have happened, right? I think that all of this is learning, like we're evolving and we're learning about what works and what doesn't. And I think sometimes too, like the silent work is okay as well, right? It's like, okay, we take nitrates out of food, does it have to be a big press release, or is it just that we've taken nitrates out of food and like people are ultimately healthier, or that's like one less carcinogen in people's bodies and potentially, babies that are being born, over the next decades, right?
It's almost better not like raising it into the zeitgeist, because then you get the people like, well, maybe I like nitrates.
Right. And then, then it becomes like a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it is tricky. It is tricky. I think that being able to be able to put people at the center, and this is where, when I was at Columbia, there was a couple of initiatives where there were, like the School of Social Work, Dr. Desmond Patton, Dr. Courtney Koshburn, they were doing a lot in connection with tech companies and placing social workers, in fellowships, at tech companies to bring in that perspective of how does technology impact people? And I think a lot about how having more sociologists or social workers or those who actually study human behavior could be beneficial to some of these rooms in the environmental movements, right? And kind of helping to shape more perspective, because sometimes these reports or these decisions are a lot of data points, but they are devoid of what is the actual story when we talk about this on the ground.
Yeah.
Right.
What motivates human beings. Yeah, exactly.
What motivates human beings, right? And what drives culture, right? And that's why, like, for a lot of the work that I'm developing, especially from like culture forward platforms that are going to, really meet the content needs of a generation that's inheriting a very different kind of world. The reality is that, like, culture still really matters. And so, these conversations translated into real kitchen table conversations, right, are really significant. And so, yeah, I think being able to ask those big meaty questions on stage will be really great in terms of responses. And I'm curious too about like what the post discussion might look like, when we're off the stage and people are coming up to you to ask more. And it's continuous. And the great thing too, Joel, and this is what I love as a journalist, is there's no right answers, right? Like there's not a singular right answer. It is always about, let's try something and see what works. If it works, let's do more of it. Or let's try something, it doesn't work, and then we stop doing, and we move into different territory.
I couldn't agree more. I live with an ethos of question everything all the time, which probably annoys the hell out of my wife and the people I work with sometimes, but I think it's the way we got to think. There's no playbook for the future. It is what we make it, right?
Absolutely. And I love that too, because I got a chance to go to this to the Futures Base Camp at the top of the year in Joshua Tree with like film producers, TV writers, like folks out of like some of the most amazing industries out of Hollywood. And we did these exercises on world building. And so like the language that I've learned this year has been this idea of world building. And it's like, how do we build a different world, right? If all of the content's going to be very dystopian and like the worst of what happens after the earth has died and, technology has taken over and the robots have made us their slaves. Like, is there a world that we can envision where there's more of a utopia, right? And we actually have some level of balance. We have, affordable, sustainable housing, right? Where people can live and be safe and have what they need, and their families are healthy and their communities are thriving, right? Where is that opportunity to bring that into a space and say, well, if we are actually here and we get to design our future, well, hell, this is the future that I want to see. This is what I want to build. This is the work that I'm doing. That's why I'm showing up every single day, because I do believe that this is possible. And we won't always get it right, but here's the vision for a really healthy, amazing, and accessible world that is clean water and the birds are good and there's no, plastic in turtles' noses and all of the things, right? And so, yeah, I've been carrying that word, world building. So I want to bring that to the stage. I want us to talk about like what is your like built future look like in your mind?
Very cool. I get to prep for that. That's a good
inspiration.
Well, Sherrell, this has been fascinating. I can't wait to meet you in person and do this live in front of an audience. And I think this is you're gonna love our last question. You've already brought this vibe to the whole conversation. But we're gonna wrap up with our final question, which is, hey, we talked about it. People get down. There's a lot of negative news. Maybe we're not on the right path. The environment's struggling. But we like to focus on solutions and optimism here on this show. I think you do too. So, Sherrell, what gives you hope for the future?
Honestly, just really passionate people who are getting up and being relentless about what they're trying to bring into the world. Like, those are the people that I try to surround myself with and learn from and follow. And, they're putting in the work to try to see something different amid all of this like grayness. And so I think it's because of them that like I have hope.
Well, I've been taking notes here. Like when your show goes live, we'll give it a title. But man, I love that word, relentless. I think it's how I've always tried to live.
I have a tattoo. Too. I'll show it to you when we're in person. I have a tattoo that says "Be relentless."
Ah, cool. I look forward to it.
It's kind of weird, but yeah.
Well, Sherrell, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. We're gonna wrap up on that. Well, before I wrap up, let's how do we plug you? I mean, people follow you on LinkedIn, Instagram,
LinkedIn,
websites. Tell us all the places to find you.
I am all over the internet all the time. I'm chronically online. LinkedIn's a great place to follow my journey, my stories, information about people that I'm meeting. And then Instagram is where I go to play. And to share a little bit, and especially all of my sustainable outfits.
Bring your flair a little bit, yep.
Just a little bit of flair, and then SherrellDorsey.com for all things business related, one-on-one coaching, speaking, leadership talks, all of those kinds of things. So you can find me all over.
Awesome stuff. We'll put it in the show notes for everyone to follow along. So again, thank you, Sherrell. Sorry, Owen, you didn't join us for this one, but
we miss you, Owen.
Thank you for always being here, and thank you, audience, for joining. You can find Owen and I also on LinkedIn, usually actively antagonizing the more talk, more complaining sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at lesstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action to make the world a better place?